name is Brunilda Pali. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the Leuven Institute of Criminology at the University of Leuven. I have the pleasure and honor to have this conversation for the oral history project of the European Society of Criminology with a dear friend and colleague, Lode Walgrave. Lode Walgrave is Emeritus Professor in Criminology at the University of Leuven in Belgium. At the University of Leuven, and more specifically at the Leuven Institute of Criminology, Lode has been director of the research group on youth criminology, where he has done extensive research on youth crime, youth justice and restorative justice. Lode was chair of the International Network for Research on Restorative Justice and of the International Association of Criminology of Youth. He has been a guest professor at the University of Montreal, Pennsylvania University and the Australian National University. He has given numerous guest lectures and keynote speeches throughout the world, has been an editorial board member of many journals, and has written hundreds of academic articles and several important books, such as Restorative Justice and the Law in 2002, Repositioning Restorative Justice 2003, and Restorative Justice, Self-Interest and Responsible Citizenship in 2008. This last book represents also the culmination of his vision for restorative justice and is considered a key reading in restorative justice. In 2008, the same year, Lode also received the European Society of Criminology Award. A prolific writer and thinker, Lode has made a highly significant contribution to the worldwide development of restorative justice, especially to his research and theoretical developments, but also towards implementation and policy, and his work has been translated in many languages. He is currently in the editorial board of the International Journal of Restorative Justice and continues to remain a great supporter of younger generation of criminologists. So Lode, that was a very concise version of your very long and impressive career. But the purpose of this project is also for, as I said, for younger and future generations of criminologists to hear stories and trace paths that are not that they are not able to read anywhere. So I would like to ask you, therefore, to take us through your academic journey from the beginning. How did you become a criminologist and ended up doing the things that you did?
I first had a degree in psychology. And then I decided to add to the psychology a degree in criminology. And in 1965, I became an assistant, as we called it at that time, to Professor Derhart. He was a professor in criminology and also in psychopathology in the psychology faculty or the department. It was a psychiatrist. So when I started with him as a psychologist, my great ambition at that time was to unravel the mainly psychological mechanism that would lead young people to commit crimes. At that time also criminology was a very small unit within the faculty of law. But in the beginning of the 70s, or by the end of the 60s already, critical criminology began to seep into criminology in Leuven, especially introduced by a young professor in criminological sociology at that time, Lode Walgrave. After a while, I've read the very famous book at that time by Taylor, Walton and Young, The New Criminology. It was in 73, I guess. And for me, that was an eye-opener. But at the same time, it confronted me with a kind of identity crisis or existential crisis, kind of. What could I, a psychologist, do within the critical criminology, which mainly focused on social, societal factors, mechanisms, power relations? What could be my role in that? Now, after this crisis, finally, I got a course as a very young professor at that time, a lecture we called it that time, an assistant professor maybe we should call it now. And my first mission was to teach youth delinquency. But I changed the name from youth delinquency into youth criminology, so that I could include not only the origins, the mechanisms and so on that would bring juveniles to commit crime, but at the same time also comments on the youth justice system, being critical on the youth justice system, also could include the approach to prevention. So gradually I developed in that broader field of youth criminology, and I developed indeed a rather successful research group on youth criminology at that time. During 15 to 20 years, we always had 10 to 15 researchers by external funding, ministry, scientific funding, Europe at that time already, and so on. And the subjects were school and delinquency, football hooliganism, methodology of methodics of radical prevention, what we call radical prevention, and then later community service, family group conferencing, restorative justice in the broader sense of the word. So it was a rather successful group at that time, and I was happy. And I hope our results also meant something. And then in 1991, I remember that very well, I went to an international seminar in Lucca, in the Tuscan mountains, it was close to Lucca. And I heard there for the first time the word restorative justice. And it was like an epiphany for me. I found this restorative justice approach an excellent third way between the always continuing discussion between rehabilitative youth justice or punitive youth justice, or more punishment for youth. The rehabilitative was criticized because it neglected the legal rights of juveniles, but of course I didn't want to go back to the punitive approach to justice, to youth justice. So for me, restorative justice said, oh, that's it. So from then on, in fact, I developed and I invested very much in this restorative justice. By the end of the 90s, I organized an international network for research on restorative justice for juveniles, but soon we dropped this for juveniles. It became an international network for research on restorative justice, funded as what they called an international research community by the Flemish Research Fund. It was quite substantive what we got, so we could organize meetings, we could travel, we could organize publications, and so on. And that was for me, in fact, the take-off for an always more stimulating, always more interesting, also very often also very pleasant meeting, discussion, debate, exchanges with, I can say, the world's most authoritative scholars in restorative justice. And that formed me, in fact, in publications, seminars, conferences, and so on. And then, when I retired, at the beginning, I didn't feel really a difference. I just continued because my work was my hobby. And actually, I retired because I wanted to do my work. What I consider is my work. We had so much administration, so much evaluation, so much waste of time. Not all work with students is waste of time, but sometimes I felt it as a waste of time. Not always, I repeat, certainly not. So I wanted to do my work, which is research, reading, publishing, and so on. So at the beginning I did that. And gradually also I focused not only on restorative justice and youth crime and youth justice and so on, but I began also to develop more ideas about what I called meta-criminology. Means thinking about the role of criminology itself, its social ethical dimensions, its social responsibility in, let's say, in its contribution to the quality of social life. So that is what I've been developing in the last 10 years, I would say. I've been publishing a few things on that. But now I can say that gradually all this is diminishing. I think partly because I feel the age, also because partly I think the others feel the age, my age. I think that I'm gradually becoming outdated more and more, so and I will quietly die then after a while, I guess. So that's my, in very short, my career.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, I can really say a lot myself, but like if I ask you now, looking back at your journey, I'd like to ask you two things. So what are you mostly proud of, and what do you think are your best achievements, your main achievements? But also, what were some of the challenges along the way? Because it's not just roses and...
No, certainly not. Certainly not. Well, I knew that this question was going to come, so I have been thinking about that. Mm-hmm. And I'm hesitating. What is my main achievement? I'm not very sure. On the one hand, we have, as academics, all one basic mission. That is to try to produce knowledge, to produce or to develop new insights and visions, and so on. And I think I did my share there. But also to transmit this to the younger generation of students, of young researchers, and also to the world of the colleagues, also to transmit it. And I think I did my share there. I did what I had to do, and if I look now at former students, how they work, where they are, what they are doing now, sometimes I have some pride about it. I feel some pride. I had some impact on them, and via them I have some impact. And also I contribute, and that's also a mission for academics, I also contribute this knowledge and these views to the public debate. At a certain moment I was very much involved in media, in discussions about youth crime, also in the emergence of restorative justice and so on. So that's the basic mission for all academics indeed, and I feel some satisfaction about that. I did my share. But on the other hand, of course, you have also many concrete things. On the Belgian level, I'm sure I had impact on Belgian legislation and Belgian practices. For example, the 2006 Juvenile Justice Act in Belgium has certainly traces of my work and the work of my team. There's not any doubt. But also the practice in the time of working with football, hooliganism, practices of prevention and so on in the by Belgian agencies. Yes, we had some impact there for sure. Another more general impact is that in my generation, I was one of but not the only one, certainly not. I was one of the researchers, the criminologists who helped to make criminology taken seriously, to be recognized as an important element in the faculty, in the university, and also in the research funding. Because at the beginning, when I introduced projects in the National Funds for Scientific Research, we were all set in the Commission for Law Research, or in the Commission for Sociological or Psychological Research, and we had to compete with other disciplines. Now there is much more attention for criminology as such, and so we have some possibilities there. It's among others thanks to my work. And then finally, indeed, my role in the restorative justice. I think, and maybe if I would look back, maybe my role has been most important there. I have helped to develop restorative justice as a particular field of research, but also as a particular approach, which is very promising on the way we deal with crime. And I had an own voice there, where I presented what I called the maximalist version of restorative justice. The maximalist version of restorative justice means that, in my view, all crimes should by priority be responded to by restorative or reparative responses. I said by priority. Of course, priority doesn't mean monopoly. That's very clear. But after every offense, even the most serious ones, we should first of all wonder what can we do to repair, to restore the harm, the suffering, the social unrest, not only within the concrete victims and the victims' environment, social environment, but also in society. What can we do to repair that? And if that is not sufficient, and sometimes it is very small what we can do, then we can think of other approaches, or complementary to this restorative approach, also think of other approaches. That means also that for me, restorative justice is to be seen within the context of law. Hence the title, as you say, restorative justice and the law. For me, that's crucially important. That restorative justice has to be developed within the constitutional democracy. It means every citizen has his rights, victims and offenders and other citizens, and we have to respect that. That's why also I limit my view on restorative justice to responding to crime. Many of my very good colleagues and friends extend the concept to restorative practices in schools, in labor market, conflicts in neighborhoods, and so on. I would not do that. I really would fix to. So that's why I always speak of my espresso definition: strong but small. Small because it's limited to responding to crime and not the rest. Small but strong. Everything by priority in restorative justice. So that's why I called it espresso definition. Challenges. I can be very short. I will be very short. On the one hand, the challenges every professor has. That is, developing good relationships with the colleagues, with the university authorities, and so on and so on. Looking for funding, looking for good researchers, trying to motivate the students, and so on. So that's part of the game, and it has its particular problems. I must say, further, I can't complain. Yes, I met some jealousy, like many colleagues of us. Sometimes you met colleagues who have some envy about what you have done and some little successes you have. You have to deal with that, and after all, my second thoughts were always that if you are the subject of jealousy, that means that you are doing very well, because in their eyes, so they want to do like you. So I could live that. But for me, the main challenge, especially my international dimension of my career, has been the language, the English. You know, in my generation, when I did secondary school, that's I think centuries ago, if I remember well, when I did secondary school, I was Dutch, Flemish, so I was taught in Dutch. And we had, as a Belgian, the second language was French. So we had always 5 or 4 hours French a week. And we had to practice French. And then we had also 1 hour German, because we have in Belgium a very small German-speaking minority. And then also 1 hour English. 6 hours Latin, and 4 hours Old Greek. So, and English was there somewhere. That was it. So in the beginning, when I came on the international scene, indeed, prefer to speak French. My first contacts, international contacts, were in French. I felt at ease there. But then the English. I remember I was in the European Council, a meeting in the European Council, the Council of Europe, not European, the Council of Europe, we had a small meeting, and one of the very famous native English-speaking colleagues, I will not name him, he was a bit mocking at me. He said, I like your English, but so with an ironic smile. And I said, it's better than your Dutch. He should mock, he should accept. After all, I'm sure that the really international language is not English, but it's bad English, and that's mine. As others English. And the native speaker has to accept that, because they have a huge advantage. They have an enormous advantage. I remember I was maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I don't remember exactly. I was in Oslo with Niels Christie, and he organized a seminar, not international, a seminar. Norwegian students, Niels and I. Of course it was in English, because I didn't speak a word of Norwegian, and they didn't speak Dutch. I'm surprised, but they didn't speak Dutch. Now, so everything was in English. But at a certain moment, the discussion went serious, and Niels wanted to go in depth, and he shifted to Norwegian. I didn't understand the word, but I saw his body language, and suddenly Niels Christie was at ease, with humor. He spoke with, I think, much more nuances, because it was his mother tongue. And that's an handicap, simply. One last point on that, and then we change to another thing, because it is, of course, not only me, it's in general the predominance of English as an international language. We have to accept that. But when we see at the university rankings worldwide, on the first 10 to 15 universities, they are all American, UK, Australian, where the native language is English. It's not because they are more clever, it's not because they have better ideas or they are doing better research, it's simply because their language. So they can publish much more easy, they have much more access to the international scene, and so they are right on top. That's it. And we have to be aware of that, and the native speaker as well.
True. But it's nobody's language in the European Society of Criminology, in the conferences.
I can speak with Albanian, with Portuguese.
I love to listen to Greek, English, Italian. That's the way it is, and it's beautiful as it is. So I wouldn't worry about that. But you mentioned several things about the challenges and the achievements, and you have also had this concept of embedded criminology that has been important for you. I wonder if it's a concept that goes together with criminology in Belgium. I'm curious about what you think is a particularity of this country, or the development of criminology in this country, and how is it different from other places?
I'm not too sure. Of course, when I began in '65 as an assistant, we were 2.5 staff. One half-time professor, in fact, this psychiatrist who had his private practice, who also teaches in psychology and so on, but a few hours a week, I think one afternoon a week or one day a week, he was on his office in criminology. And he had 2 assistants. The one who a year later prepared his PhD, and me. Even not 2.5 staff. And of course, many professors who just teach elsewhere and came to give 1 or 2 classes a week, and that's all. And we had 5 students. Currently, Criminology Leuven has about 80 staff members and has about 700, 800 students. So there's a huge boost, and it's not only in Leuven, of course, it's also in Ghent here, it's also in Brussels, and so on. So criminology has boosted. And the first question, of course, how does that come? What made this to boost? And that is two things I see. The one is the idea that, is the fact that security and insecurity, crime and terrorism and so on, are very hot topics now in public rhetoric, so that the society, also the politicians, but even the scientific funds, understand, they think to understand that they have to invest in this topic, in this social problem, one. And secondly, I flatter myself that the boost of criminology is also to be thanked to the quality of the criminologists. Not only the academic criminologists, but also the students. Because since I began, now students, former students of criminology, they work in the welfare, in the police, in the prisons, in the youth care. Some are in members of the cabinet. Even we had one or two ministers who did criminology also in our classes. Also they have delivered quality, and I think it's really an interaction between the quality and also the public concern about it, and that has made criminology to boost. Mm-hmm. A consequence is that criminology in Belgium is, of course, carried out, practiced in a small country. So even after a while, and I'm sure now more than in my time, I could meet ministers in a reception, in a meeting somewhere, a working group, because the minister himself organized working groups and invited me, as they do now, invite my younger colleagues. So I met these people, and I think that's disciplining at both sides. On the one hand, we have some impact. Yes, they listen to us, they know us, they were on our banks, on our benches, so they still listen, and so on. But on the other hand, they discipline us as well, because of the friendly relations, because of our participation in working groups that prepare policy decisions, because of possible cooperation in the future, because of the prospects of possible funding. We are not too critical. We are very careful. And that's typical for a small country, where we meet each other all the time, and so we are mutually disciplining. Mm-hmm. I think if Europe would take over much more of the justice policy and security policy, criminology Leuven would have much less impact. It is not coincidental, I think, that in Belgium, for example, restorative justice has had such an impact on prisons and so on, because in Malta I could take the phone and call the minister or somebody of his cabinet. Mm-hmm. In bigger countries you cannot. Mm-hmm. But the risk is that criminology becomes a bit embedded. Mm-hmm. So part of the system is disciplined, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, and to move beyond Belgium, then what do you think then would be the relationship of criminology with policy in general? Yeah. You've written about this. You said also in the last phase of your after your retirement, you're busy with this, with the idea of public criminology, meta criminology. So how should we relate to policy? How should we relate to the media?
I think there is a basic problem in the relation, currently there is a basic problem in the relation between criminology and crime-related policy, let's say it like that. On the one hand, criminology is a scientific activity. So that means that it tries to be rational. Of course, criminologists understand the emotional dimension, but they try to research emotions and to understand it through fact-finding, logical reasoning, reflecting logically on normative behavior, on efficiency, and so on. So criminology is a activity which basically is per definition based on ratio. Whereas in public policy currently, emotional populism is taking the lead. And also the politicians are under pressure of this kind of emotional or populist emotionalism. So we are playing, policymakers and the public, and on the other hand, the scientists, the academic activity, we are playing in a different game. And I think that much of the criminological visions currently are not in accordance anymore with what the population wants, what the media want, where it is bon ton to ridicule scientists as unworldly, to refute facts, and to replace it by fake facts and so on. So there is a struggle going on there. And criminology as such is, has to reflect in it. I see within criminology, I will make it very roughly two directions. On the one hand, the ones who are giving in more and more towards what I would call embedded criminology. What is embedded criminology? Embedded criminology for me is a kind of criminology, I compare it to embedded war journalists. So like embedded war journalists report within the frame that is decided by the military, and they accept the statements by the military as the truth. Embedded criminologists also accept to work within the frame of penal populism, and they accept the problems as they are defined by the authorities as the only problems. That's embedded criminology. On the other hand, you have indeed a kind of criminology that seeks to escape that, to keep critical, to keep being critical. I think that's very important. In that sense also, the danger of, it's very new, well, it's not very new, but it's coming up now, the idea of what they call social impact of research. And even it's playing a role more and more in distributing the funds. Is that an interesting research? Is it well done? But also, what will be its social impact? My skepticism is caused by a number of questions. Social impact, that means in fact usefulness. Who will decide upon the usefulness? Who will decide on the criteria to decide on the usefulness? And what will be the price for the research, social research in general, and also criminology, that is trying to dig deep, to look wider, to be more autonomous, who is also more critical. What will be the fate of this kind of criminology? For example, I would say instead of social impact, I would prefer the word social relevance. For me, it's very social relevant to research, for example, the social historical backgrounds of the current obsession with crime and safety. To do research on the dead end of the purely defensive crime-related policy, the dead end of the war on crime, on drugs, and so on, and also research, very social, to look for the alternatives, restorative justice, crime-related policy that would ground its roots into a kind of solidarity, social justice, offering hopeful prospects and so on. That's for me the beginning of every crime-related policy, and we can do much research on that. The problem is, of course, that this kind of research is sometimes a bit difficult to do according to the traditional positive methodology, but that's not the reason not to do it. I would always say, certainly it should be done.
Interesting what you're saying also, because yesterday at the plenary, the new award of the European Society was given to the Finnish scholar Tapio Pali, and he gave this, according to me, very interesting example of how, let's say, in Norway and in Scandinavian countries in general, policy was so much influenced by criminologists like Nils Christie and all the rest, but not through what we would call today evidence-based kind of policy or research, but more by a vision, by even a human kind of rational, moral sort of indication on behalf of the academics, and the policymakers follow, and the media also being very reasonable on that. And he was giving it as an example of, so today we are doing more empirical research, more what we call the evidence-based research, but how little actually that is influencing policy at the end of the day. So there is some kind of contradiction there, which I found interesting, and now listening to you.
I think, yes, I'm not surprised at all. Yeah. The evidence-based research is important. Let's be clear, I think it's very important, but is certainly not the only thing that matters. I remember many years ago, one of my first projects I ever had, it was about the agencies that helped juveniles in trouble, but in an alternative way. So it was not the authority-based, but I did research on that. It was mainly qualitative research. And I remember I presented that in a little seminar with maybe 10, 12, 15 maybe persons around the table, among others the members of the cabinet who received the research. And they found it very interesting. But they asked me, couldn't you have some tables, please? And graphs. So just the idea that there is a figure and there are tables and graphs, they would take it more seriously. Some of them can even read the tables and the graphs, but that's still so. It is not statistical arabesques that make good science.
Yeah, exactly. So, if you can give me a sense of what do you think criminology in Europe looks like to you, and what are its main features, but also what should be its future? Where should it head? Where should it go? How should it develop?
Of course, there's two things: criminology in Europe and the future of criminology in general. Well, maybe criminology in general, because we are now. One of the things is indeed what I just said. Maybe my first idea about criminology towards the future is, first of all, we must not try to develop criminology as a particular discipline, separated from the other disciplines. Criminology should, on the contrary, try to integrate more and more as a social science within the social sciences. We are using psychological concepts, we are using sociological, economical, anthropological, and you name it. And we concentrated, of course, on a social problem, crime, responding to crime, prevention, unsafety feelings. We are concentrating on that topic, but it's not a discipline on itself. That's the first thing. And further, I would like to remind what I said when I received this European Criminology Award from the European Society of Criminology in 2008. I found, and I dream, I described there what I called at that time criminology as I see it ideally. And I have three characteristics. The one is methodology, sound methodology. All intellectual activities that claim the status of being scientific rest upon methodology. That certainly not mean only positivist methodology. There are many topics which really touch the heart of criminological questioning that cannot be researched by positive methodology. But still criminologists should try to do it as according to a methodologically sound way as possible. They should still develop how they are working and submit to the colleagues their methodology. That's basic for all scientific activities. Otherwise, it's not science. Maybe it's wise, it's well thought, but it's not science. Scientific is better. Second thing is autonomy. I just described it. I think criminology as a social science and other sciences as well should be able to develop its own questioning, should be being able to being critical about the current policy, not per se. Sometimes some things are good, are well done, so we can also support political options and so on, but we should be autonomous to be that. Much research now is ordered by government, and sometimes I compare this research with research on the influence of nicotine, which is paid by the tobacco industry. So that doesn't make sense. Even the government-ordered research must draw its basic positions, its basic questioning from more fundamental research, which should be completely autonomous. And third characteristic is social responsibility. We must be aware that criminological and other social sciences, that such research matters for social life. It is used, it may be misused, and we must be aware of that. We are not, I made then the comparison with we are not chickens who lay their eggs and leave it to the consumer what to do with that egg. No, we are humans, we are producing things for social life, and we have to be, even if criminologists, among others, do not really agree always about what the ideal social life would be, which is not problem, they have to submit it, they have to be aware of this social responsibility. For me that is crucial, that we are aware of this, because we are members of not only of the society, of the community of scientists, but also the community of humans. Yeah, that's for me the big line, and then indeed more detailed, leave the beaten paths here and there, because if we try to understand, that's another topic, if we try to understand why people commit crime, we should not be obsessed anymore to know all the things about his or her past. We should more look at their future, how they see their future. All behavior, also criminal behavior, is made because of a reason. When I am asked to do this interview, and when I accept to do this interview, I have my reasons. I am motivated by a future. I hope that some people will look at it. I hope that some people will agree with it or have an idea based on what they heard from me. I know that some will say, what is that? What a bullshit is Walgrave telling? Okay, but I take that. But that's about the future. It's the future that motivates me to accept this behavior. And that's even for a young lad who takes the handbag of a lady in the metro, in the underground. His future is that he will be able to run fast enough to escape being arrested, that he knows the way. That's his immediate future, that he will find in that handbag things which are valuable with him, for him, that his peers will say, wow, you there, you are quite somebody. It's the future that motivates him, not the past. But, of course, his future is formed partly by his experience in the past. Yes, indeed. But the direct access to behavior is... If you want to understand why people commit crime, is the same, exactly the same basic schedule as you want to understand why somebody becomes a professor or a footballer, or it's exactly the same things. And we must be aware of that.
In that sense, then, is your do you think that in Europe we are a little bit kind of stuck in the beaten path, what you call, or do you see variations? Do you see that the European criminology changing, or
things are changing? But of course, can we speak about the criminology?
Yeah, that's also.
Look at the subjects which are presented today and yesterday and tomorrow in this ESC meeting. So differentiated. What brings them together? Maybe is the idea that behavior is being controlled and the way how it is controlled. I think it was Charles Dixon, again centuries ago, when I was still young and beautiful, who proposed to change the word criminology by controlology, but it never took off. It has never been accepted. But in fact, what brings all these guys here together? What is their common topic? It's so differentiated.
Yeah, what do you think is the role of the European Society of Criminology in pushing the developments or supporting the development of criminology in Europe?
Well, first of all, they are doing well. They bring people together, 1,400 participants here, I've just been told. They come, they meet each other in the conferences and the meetings, but also outside. They inspire each other. They find it very pleasant, which is very also motivating, and so on. They facilitate thematic working groups, very good. They distribute awards, which is very good. I'm one of the victims of it, and really I enjoyed it. I found it a kind of recognition of what I try to do, and we all are very flattered, of course, by recognition. That is so. So basically, I think the European Society should keep these elements. There are a few things. The first one, I wonder. Yesterday, or a few days ago, I received the last issue of the European Journal of Criminology. And sometimes these journals have very good articles, really very good articles, and not only with figures and tables, but also very wise, theoretically well-sound articles. So I read much of them. But I think that the content of the European Journal is a bit flat. It's only articles. Why do they not include book reviews? I never understood that. All journals I read, and I'm not reading all these journals anymore as I did before, but still I have very often journals in my hand. The book reviews is, for me, an important thing. Why don't they do this? Why not, for example, also publish an interview with, for example, with the award winner? Why not interview now our Finnish colleague and maybe like you interview me now? Who are you? Why did you do that? And it can be very inspirational for people, and then they don't have to do this special effort. They will have everything in the journal. So I have some suggestions for each other. But also, as a criminology, precisely because of the more raising public pressure on policy making, and the politicians feel electorally vulnerable, they may a bit run after disciplining, trying to discipline criminology more. Maybe the European Society of Criminology should also develop initiatives to try to support criminologists and criminology as an autonomous and social science as an autonomous action research or autonomous research as such. A few days ago, I received an email by Hans-Jörg Körner. He has a kind of he has a circular letter for people.
I received those. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a press release by the German rectors of the universities, who especially had this statement that they are concerned about the loss of freedom, the loss of autonomy of the sciences. The German rectors of the universities, and they underlined how important it is. Maybe the ESC can do the same thing, because particularly criminology is very much under pressure to become more and more embedded. Another suggestion, I thought about this language problem for me. I'm sure that many younger colleagues can deal with their English much better than I, because they are living in another world. But still, even as a member of the editorial team of this International Journal of Restorative Justice, we receive submissions where even I say, yes, that's interesting, but this language is not good enough. Somebody has to do it, to work at it. Who can do this? I don't know if the European Society can help there. I simply have no idea. But I would appeal to try to be very creative. And finally, we have been speaking all the time about criminology as an academic activity, the autonomy of the scientific activity, and so on. We may not forget that at universities we are educating criminologists, especially for practice. Most of our students will go in the police, in the prison, in youth work, and so on. What does that mean to them? How is the relation between this academic criminology, which is by definition, tries to be by definition critical, and this applied criminologists who have to work in the service of the authorities? How is this relation? I think also that the European Society of Criminology should organize some reflection on that. Yeah.
Yes, okay. Lode, just to conclude, maybe one last question. What is an advice you would give to younger criminologists, just based on your experience?
Well, try to be happy, which is crucially important. Even that's of course between brackets. That's not. But to be a good scientist, to be balanced, to be a good scientist, and so on, it's important to have some balance in your personal life. That you are not cramped. You feel well, and okay. And then I would especially underline the three characteristics of my criminology as I see it ideally. Maybe my basic, maybe particular advice comes to my mind now. First of all, keep on dreaming. Utopia is a very important thing.
An academic duty, you have called it.
I've called it an academic duty to develop and to refer to utopias. One. My second advice would be keep respect, because we are living in a world, working in a world where, with criminals and so on, where disrespect is very much at hand. Now, there is lots of research that shows that when people are approached with respect, much more is possible than if they experience disrespect. For me, that's a basic attitude for all criminologists. My third one would be expertise is very important, but wisdom is still more important. Expertise, your knowledge and your technicity is, yes, you have it. Keep it and use it, but be wise. You are also a human being. And my fourth advice would be keep the balance between your personal and your professional life.
Thank you very much, Lode. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with you.
Pleasure with me, for me as well. Thank you.